Hello, let me get this set up really quick. Going to go over what I've been working on over the past semester. Okay, let me allow that. Okay, so what I'm going to be going over today is what I've been working on, which is a baseline visitor study for the reinstallation, or the reinstallation of an ancient Egyptian art collection in a local museum. Okay, so more specifically, let's give you some background on that. Again, like I said, a local art museum received a grant from the National Endowment for the Arts to reinstall their ancient Egyptian collection. And right now that collection is in a smaller gallery in the basement, but it's going to be moved into a much larger space in the main area of or floor of the museum, and that's because this collection historically has been very popular amongst visitors. With they have two mummies, and people love to come in there, and in the past they love to come see them and engage with them. It's been especially popular with school groups and K through 12 teachers as a teaching tool, as well as the docents are at the museums, give a lot of tours of this collection specifically for younger children. And the goal of this reinstallation is to reinstall it in a more visitor-centered manner and on a bigger scale. So what do I mean by visitor-centered? So visitor-centered is a philosophy that is really picking up steam in the museum, that focuses more on the visitor than the object. So it's, instead of being about something, an object, it's for someone. So everything that the museum does begins and ends with the visitor's needs. And this evaluation is a byproduct of that philosophy, insofar as we are engaging visitors as stakeholders in the project, and as well as members of the staff of the museum, to make this a more visitor-friendly, engaging space. Okay. So with that grant from the NAE, or the NEA, excuse me, there is a stipulation that the grant report include an evaluation of the reinstallation. So this is going to be a product of that, and it also helps keep everybody on board in the museum staff. So this is their incentive, is that they have to do this because they have to have an evaluation component to the grant write-up, and that grant write-up, or the reinstallation, will occur in spring 2017. So we're thinking that by the summer of 2017, that write-up will need to be finished. Okay, so that is the background. And the purpose of the evaluation. Again, it's a baseline visitor study, so we're getting a baseline reading of how visitors want to interact with the ancient Egyptian art collection, and how they currently do, and what's the difference between those, and how can we take those into consideration when we reinstall the collection. Again, it's also to obviously fulfill the NEA grant write-up requirement, and importantly, and this has a lot to do with the design of the evaluation, is that one of the impacts of the study is to try and build the evaluation capacity in-house, so within the museum, so that when future galleries are reinstalled, hopefully under the same philosophy, that individuals within the museum will be able to have the skills to conduct similar evaluations to guide those reinstallations. And you'll see that as I begin to talk about the specifics of the evaluation, how I'm involving these members of the museum, and how I'm trying to give them some tools to move forward with this process in the future. Okay, so evaluation questions. Again, this is a baseline study, so these are very broad, to allow to really explore these ideas, but at the same time keep us on track. And these are sort of the mantras that we try to keep in mind while we're going forward with this evaluation. So what do visitors know about ancient Egyptian art? So what information and knowledge do they bring with them as they enter those museum doors, before they get to the gallery, what do they want to know about Egyptian art, and how do visitors want to learn about ancient Egyptian art. So what are those entry points for engagement that visitors prefer? What are their learning preferences? Those sorts of things. Okay, so those are the evaluation questions. I'm going to start at the end here, looking at the impacts of the evaluation, both long-term and short-term. I've kind of already touched on these, so I won't go into it too much. Aside from that, the building the capacity in-house to do evaluations is also part of the museum's current strategic plan. And you see here the fostering meaningful, innovative, etc., and reaching and engaging and sustaining the museum's future audience and membership. Those are two key points of the strategic plan that we are trying to hit with this evaluation, aside from what we need to do for the NEA grant. So short term, as in next 4 years, meet those strategic plan standards, and long term, have this evaluation stand as a guidepost for the reinstallation of other collections within the museum. Okay, so here we have outcomes and activities. So I'll be talking about, what does this look like in action? So going off those 3 questions, getting that understanding of what their history is with experience in Egyptian art, what their knowledge preferences, that kind of information will be done by training specifically interns right now, as well as staff they'll sit into, on how to conduct tracking and timing evaluations and observational note-taking of visitors in the current gallery. And that's pretty, the observational note-taking, we're just observing behaviors and seeing where attention is paid, and what objects are the most currently engaging, and to figure out what the next steps are, what we could do to make the gallery more interesting, will be done through interviews, face-to-face, kind of surveying how different visitors feel about the collection, what they want to know, and how they'd like to learn. And that will be really explored in depth through focus groups of super users. And super users is a term that we're using to describe visitors who are very invested in the museum, who frequent the museum and are familiar with the collection. And these include the teachers that take their students on these group tours and field trips. And we will have 8 representatives from that demographic, with 2 from the elementary, middle, high school, and university levels, as well as docents, so those individuals who are charged with giving those tours of the Egyptian gallery, and frequent visitors or members. So membership will be involved, the docent core leader is involved, and as well as the head of teacher services. These 3 individuals are, we had a meeting last week to discuss sampling strategies, but I'm leaving primarily those sampling strategies up to them. However they want to go about soliciting these individuals through news or e-newsletters, through publications, through emails. As long as we can sample in an ethical and well, let me back that up. These individuals know the teachers and the docents and the members better than I. So as stakeholders in this process, I'm giving them some wiggle room to come up with some sampling strategies for to choose these individuals. And of course, these will be ratified with the whole group to make sure that everything is fair and equal. But that's what's going on with the focus groups. That should be happening towards the beginning of June. The incentive for these individuals to come is your basic coffee and snacks to keep them on board. But the super users historically have been very willing to be involved in these kinds of projects, especially knowing that their voices will be heard, and the reinstallation of the collection is huge for them, and the curator of Egyptian art is also involved and will be debriefing them at the beginning, so they get a chance to interact with her and really make a meaningful contribution to the future of the museum. Okay, and let's see. In bold down here I have the analysis and interpretation, reporting methods. This will be, they're going to need an executive summary as well as the full report to go along with the NEA grant write-up, and this will also be given to the director as well as the learning and engagement or education department. Okay, so back to tracking and timing. What is tracking and timing? What am I going to be training interns on, and as well as museum staff? So right here we have an overlay of multiple tracking and timing observations of a gallery. So here you have a layout of a gallery, and if it starts over, let's see, you have pathways. These are all pathways that visitors are taking through the museum, and some of these are circled. That's showing that they're spending X amount of time at a certain object. There's a little bit of note taking on there, and you can just see how multiple observations like this overlaid kind of get to see a little bit of a flow of how visitors engage with the gallery and what they find most interesting, and it's a useful tool to get, especially when you're working with baseline interpretations of visitor interaction in the gallery. It looks a little messy here, of course. I'm not saying I'm going to overlay all of them, but it just kind of shows you what tracking and timing entails. Okay, so looking back on this process, if I could do anything different, I would start meeting with stakeholders in the museum earlier and more frequently. We have representatives from development, from education, from the curatorial staff with the Egyptian curator involved. I mean, we have a representation from a broad swath of the museum, which is great. However, had they been involved earlier and more frequently, the dialogue that we have would be, I feel like it would be more robust, and they could be involved at a much deeper level. So far, especially in building the logic model, that was primarily me, but I went through the director of learning and engagement first and I met with her frequently to kind of discuss how to get this evaluation rolling, and this is and then that information was taken to these stakeholders. So if we could have had these representatives from throughout the museum in with the director of education, we may have ended up with more robust evaluation, but that's not the case. Let's see. Let's see. Second one, similar evaluation conducted with other collections. So the museum is going through and reinstalling a number of their galleries, and some of them have already started. So the American collection is going through a similar process, and ideally this evaluation would have been the first, so that this could have served as sort of a template to guide those visitor studies that would guide the reinstallation of these collections. So we're coming in not at the end and not even the middle, but somewhere in between the beginning and the middle of these reinstallations, and had we been at the very beginning, could have really made this a more, I mean, there could have been improvements to this plan. And finally, and ending on this is always starting at the end, really beginning big and at the end, and keeping the end in mind. And the more that I could have done that, I think the more I could have saved myself a lot of heartache by not getting bogged down in the details. But I mean, that's also something to maybe always do outside of evaluation. So anyway, I hope this answers your questions, and if you do have any questions or comments or anything, feel free to email me or through Blackboard, or especially I'll see your comments on the discussion board, and I look forward to it. Thank you.